Hi there, Randy Green here, and welcome to another podcast. There is some things that I want to put here that aligns with our 12-dimensional energy system, depending on if we are systemic, galactic, cosmic of origin, or we are Earth beings. And Earth beings have 9 dimensions, and they have a tendency to see the Earth scheme in a different way. Let me try to explain that a little bit. Earth beings are what we could call of a different variety. And I think, and I'm not going to say it is so, but I think, as I recall from my old studies of the esoteric material, they're talking about the lunar monads, that's souls, that came here from the lunar scheme. And we know the composition of the moon and Earth are very similar, and we can always discuss what the moon is and who brought it here and the engineering of it and the purpose of it. Point being is that if we are playing with the moon, that's how it is in my universe, that the moon is a planetoid that was dragged here, artificially built, then why does it have the same composition as Earth? And this is where we need to understand that Earth was not Earth with lunar material before the moon was dragged in. And in that way, change the composition of the original reality field of Earth, which in my old material spells differently. And then it became a kind of a replicate. It changed foundationally changed the fabric of our reality field, the Earth hub, let's call it that way, into be similar to the moon, so that the lunar monads or the earthlings, the lunars, could inhabit the Earth. And the earthlings are technically lunar in structure. That's the 9-dimensional rings that comes from that. And this is just the raw interpretation I get when I begin to look into it, because it's all about asking the right questions. And in that way, I'm beginning to, okay, how was it I thought about the lunars back then? Because I haven't really touched ground much with that. But since I'm now working with the nine dimensions of the Earth body, since most of them are damaged, I'm wondering, not just because of a timeline event, but what happened there? How did that come to be? And when did the moon actually come into our solar system? I don't know, because time doesn't exist when we're looking at things in these angles. So I have to go in terms of, was it before the colonization of the D10 collective, the Dracos, or was it after? I get it was around the same time, because when I look at the moon, all I get, that's a Trojan horse. It was brought here deliberately to alter the 9 dimensions of our Earth, which were a higher dimensional Earth to begin with, because the core foundation of it was in the 4th dimension up to the 12th, connected to the Andromedan system. By pulling in the moon, it completely changed the fabric of our Earth, because it was connected like kind of an infinity sign that goes between the core of the moon and the core of our planet, and changing it and solidifying it further. And I also talk about how the 4th dimension was taken away from our Earth hub some 5,000 BC, around that time, where we get the archaeological, historical surveying, or what you call surfacing of civilization in Mesopotamia and other ancient civilizations. Including Crete, by the way, they go so far back 7,000 BC, with some, or is it 7,000 years ago, I think it was. Bear with me when I do science, because my brain just doesn't remember linear thinking, but it does get impressions that goes with cycles and realms and understandings and how these systems are working together. And again, let me remind you, when science make these calculations and distinctions, they are carbon dating certain items that they find, and if they find other items, they will have to reassess their initial assessment. So it's not a truth either. It's a working hypothesis due to the data and the material they have investigated and that has surfaced so far. So it's just a matter of something new will surface, then they are forced to change their paradigms and the way they understand it. But if we go with the fact that the 4th dimension was taken away from our reality field, let's just say 7,000 years ago, that would be around 5,000 BC. So that kind of fits, right? then that would mean that all the civilization that existed prior to that, they had fourth dimensional basis. And if that is so, then the 5,000 years ago, where we have the organic civilization we understand today as third density, that's a vibrational state, not third dimension, third density, then we understand that that came with the moon. So was the moon then dragged here 5,000 BC? No, but it played a part in it. I kind of see it as it was already there, but the adaptation process from the energies of the moon to the energies of the earth and taking away the fourth dimension from our reality field happened over a long period of 10,000 years. And we don't have any records of that time. We don't have any paintings. We don't have anything other than at that point we got a new type of grace coming in. And we had, which are kind of the administrators of the lunar civilizations and the monads, quote unquote, they have there, because monads are kind of these little light orbs that can be harvested and can be put into different types of clone bodies. And the earth body is an engineering that technically fits the holographic pattern of the lunar civilizations, which we know from the esoteric material ruined their own lunar scheme and had to be brought here to participate in the joint evolution on our planet, like many of the other planets that have been depopulated and brought to our Earth scheme. So I still stand by that. And all of that meant that a lot of groups that weren't really able to be here, for instance, Mars is technically in the fourth dimension, the civilizations that live there, not the planet today, because that civilization is gone. They were raided by the lizards a long time ago. So whatever was there is devastated, and whatever civilizations were there were then enslaved and brought other places and was taken over by the Dracos and whatnot. But point being, in all of this, we are dealing with a very advanced type of civilization that makes it difficult to assess what is what and what is not. And I got pushed out there. I glitched out, which was interesting because I was investigating the moon and then I began investigating Mars and then my brain just glitched out. So what I want to say here is that that's the first level of investigation where I kind of say, okay, the ninth dimensional Earth scheme is the lunar scheme. That's the biology we have today. And I know I'm working with a different angle in the Souls of Humanity and Tarology. At that time, I was investigating the different groups under the humanoid groups that came here as part of the colonization. So technically, my books there is about the colonization, which is a different collective from D4 to D10. And they could come in because we had the fourth dimension. But what smarter way to take away an interactive simulation program functionality by creating a sub-terrain, pulling in a 9-dimensional scattered hub planetoid, put it in, connecting it to Earth, and by that lowering vibration of Earth due to the inconnectivity done by technology, and with that solidifying the fourth dimensional genetics, inserting different fragments from the colonial groups, linking us up to an artificial fourth and artificial fifth dimension that are also bridging to the moon as well as to Mars. And by that, being able to run the big operations they did here. And for me, that resonates completely. So that's my further investigation of the Earth scheme and how the lunar Earth scheme is technically the lunar scheme. So when we talk about Earthlings and the good old clones I talk about in my old material, then we're technically talking about projects from the moon. And here's the caveat. Because we know through human history and depictions in all cave paintings and other things from the Middle Ages and whatnot, we have so many compared to none. Let's say we have at least 10, 20, 30, perhaps a little bit more depictions of crafts and astronauts or whatever we'd call it, beings from the sky. All the gods come from the heavens, right? So in that we have the understanding that that group of the lunars, which are technically the foundation of the maintainer grace, as I talk about in modern history, they are maintaining the Earth scheme body, the lunar construct, the lunar holographic architecture that's behind the human form. which makes so much sense to me as I am now working with these concepts of really understanding my physicality. And why, when we are talking about the Andromedan technology, the fueling, the core of Earth, vibrating on the subsidiary timeline that we can then connect to so we can do our path out of here, then that is the foundational changes of our biofield, emotional field, and mental field to be able to no longer or to disconnect from the lunar scheme and no longer vibrate in that manner, because we are not lunar monads, we are solar monads. And if you go through human history and human quote-unquote religion and all civilizations, you will see there's been this weird conjunction or play out between groups that were worshipping the moon or groups that were worshipping the sun. This is important, and no, I do not see the sun as feminine, and the moon, or the moon as feminine, or the moon as masculine, or the sun as feminine, which is interesting. I think it's in the old Hindu religions where actually it's reversed. It's not just as we have it here in the West, where we're seeing, the moon is feminine, that's why it's the lunar and the lunar cycles and the female biology and blah blah blah. So I'm sorry for saying that. The only thing I can say that, but I don't want to talk about that here on YouTube, is the reproduction that goes with the maintainer grays and their lineages, and the abductions of certain females and the harvesting of their genetic material. Because then we begin to understand that they are building, again, we are talking about these groups that are here to build different forms of bodies. They can continue their existence outside the solar system as this solar system is resetting, as we know. Another thing that I want to bring in here is the sun. The sun is also a construct. It's not consciousness. It does not hold consciousness. It's not a living being. Earth does not hold consciousness. Earth is not a living being. These are constructs, very advanced. So they are interacting with our consciousness. And what we are affect the construct. So what we are affects our planet. We are the ones that are affecting the holographic energetic architecture of our planet, including the different groups that have been here that have put in their different types of grids and different types of crystal technology, from where they've been able to create these different forms of racial grids that has allowed these groups to operate and exist within our Earth scheme. So we're here talking about an advanced form of genetic modulation programs that both goes with extraterrestrial technology, extraterrestrial crafts. Sometimes they down a craft, which then becomes part of the Earth grid as it decomposes and goes into the soil and connects to the ancient fourth dimensional grids, from where that vibration then allows for different sectors where these groups can then begin to modulate and engineer different forms of vessels that can then become their organic vessels if they choose to do so. Sometimes they don't even need the organic vessels. Sometimes they're just doing them holographically because that's the foundation of our Earth scheme. It is a very advanced construct. The sun is a very advanced construct that, yes, we're also positioned here as part of, you see, the original quote-unquote solar construct in our solar system was Jupiter, or still is. But Jupiter was re-engineered because that's the sixth dimensional foundation. Right now it's just the gaseous, whatever they have re-engineered it into in the third density. We're here talking about the fourth and fifth and sixth density, the vibrational state of it. That's the kind of a sun. And then I have to investigate, what is a sun? Why is the sun even there in a solar system? The suns, all of the solar or the souls that are in the different systems that we call solar systems. Again, we also, when we talk about, for instance, the lunars, what is implied in the understanding of a moon or a lunar or planetoid is that they do not have suns. They are humanoids. So they come from a different type of often AI oversight, technology-driven reality field that is what we would call terrestrial. It is low vibrant in the third density, but it does not have a sun. Their sun has died out a long time ago. They are now upholding that through artificial means until their organic vessels die out, because the organic vessels comes from the infusions of a sun. So when the sun is no longer there, the organic vessel seems to be, and they turn more and more semi-organic until they become non-organic. And that's part of the route out of existence. So when there is a sun, and that's why we have these dynamics of the sun that will burn energy and then eventually burn out and then become a dwarf, and then whatever comes, and then it collapses, and then it ceases to be, and then it explodes and turns into dust. The trajectory of all suns, which indicates for us it's not consciousness, because if it was consciousness, it would continue to evolve. There are people who think, including the esoterics, that the suns are like a logos, it's like a huge intelligence, and it has incarnated in the form of a sun, and by that it will do its different cycles, and then it will pop out of here into another realm where it will become something else, some other large body consciousness. And I like that idea. It's neat and it's nice, but that's not how I see it, because it doesn't have to be that way. It's kind of it. I have to be careful here, because I'm not here to devastate people's belief systems, but we are to investigate the options of different interpretations, and from that begin to work with the idea of not what's true or not, because that's segregation, and we'll get into in split hairs and get into great debates. But actually, okay, what is the consciousness potential evolutionary process of investigating the differences in interpretation of a reality field? This is about investigating complex information system to build our own complex holographic energetic architecture, so that we can work with our core consciousness principles of what we truly are. So we investigate information and ideas and concepts and constructs of mind, so that we can develop our mind field to be able to vibrate and radiate in the level of the original sciences of the solar civilizations that used to exist here. The downsizing of our mind field into just being a gooey brain is part of the solidification that happened when the Earth changed due to the lunar pull-in. It became what we could call more mechanical and not actively responding and interacting with the fourth dimension of the holographic interactive simulation program. Okay, so downloads are technically when we have bleed through into the original capacity that we have as part of our higher order energy system. So solar beings are systemic beings. They are not terrestrial. They are, as a foundation, fourth density. Earth beings or terrestrial beings are, as a foundation, third density, and they are civilizations that are dying. They are ceasing to exist because they have lost their sun. So when science is saying, oh, we are having visits from extraterrestrials, so yeah, there are other planets out there, it's a no, in my perspective. But that just means that we are now vibrating in a similar mechanical density way that draws in semi-organic civilizations from dying systems that, of course, are coming here and saying, yay, this is a party field. Let's get what we can. You remember the slugs from Men in Black, right? The movie, The Men in Black, or was it 1 or 2? I can't remember where he visited. They are in also these little slugs that sit in there smoking cigars and whatnot. That's a lot of these different energetic parasites that are linked to the semi-organic, artificially driven reality fields that uses the semi-organic technology to produce organic, quote-unquote, slugs that are then function as energetic parasites in the artificial fourth as part of our Earth 9-dimensional core configuration of the physical form. Okay, so so that's how this is being administered through the artificial fourth. And I talk about these storyboards and cube technology and the energetic parasites in the basic and advanced energy work. And of course, when we are talking about these things, and I just want to put that in as a reminder, when we investigate the extraterrestrial and other dimensional level of our reality field, the first step in all work on the path, that is your path out of here, is the psychological work, it's the grounding work, it's the understanding on who and what you are, it's the trauma work, it's working with who you are as a person. Because if you don't understand who you are as a person, you are just bypassing your core wounds and exploring other realities, thinking, oh, that must be so much better, just to discover that the core wounds you have in this life, and past lives, and many other lives, because they're there. It's kind of perpetuating trauma conditioning that's going on to keep us in the cycles of existence, until we really understand how to work with these and transform it and heal and turn our traumas into the understanding of our true capacities and how we're dealing with this. And that's a lot of psychological work and inner work and contemplation work. And however system we choose to work within, that's why I work in the whole flow through center, where I say those who are going to the next step, they are aware of all these different psychodynamic methods, and they have been working with them and understand how to use them when they're working with their three lower fields. They are working with the psychosomatic connection to the biofield. They are understanding food and diet and exercise are important, including where to live right now, which is one of the reasons why I know the island is not for me for a longer period of time, is that I can barely walk because it affects my feet. So that means that whatever I'm engaging with here is taking away my vitality, and that goes into my body literally stops moving around, so to speak. It could also be due to menopause and all sorts of other stuff. But there's a connection point there. We have more and more female who have issues with their feet and legs. But that could also be due to, if they're part of the harvesting programs that are collapsing, it could be due to overuse of hormonal inputs. It could be due to what happened on our planet during the pandemic. It could be due to the fact that the original astral barrier is collapsing and there's a lot of energetic parasites that are creating distortion energies. And if we are in an area where the genetic and energetic processes are so distorted compared to what our system is, then our biology will, of course, exemplify the surroundings, because we interfere with where we are. We are not closed systems, hence the open system integrative process. We are part of the surroundings where we live. So that's also those of us who are doing this. We might have to migrate. We might have to move somewhere else and figure out, where can I exist? And the body becomes the tuning fork to tell us the biofield here is no longer being supported, hence the organic vessel will begin to collapse. Point being, since we now have more and more incoming groups from terrestrial, planetary, third density systems, they are harnessing the resources of our Earth grid, which means there's less and less for us, which forces us to go more and more Android, mechanical, and AI based. Because that's what they do. That's how they literally, like scavengers, like grasshoppers, are changing the reality fields they come in contact with. As they harness what they need to reproduce and recreate their own civilization, they wear off the civilization and the places that they come and get into. And these groups that I'm here talking about, the other groups from other similar third density reality fields of the Orion group and the Alpha Centauri group and some of the Arcturian groups and some of the Andromedan groups and some of all of these third density groups of the dying worlds that we are part of in this sector. And they are jumping from these places that still have a sun, which goes back to our construct we call our sun. The sun is an original construct that is put into each one of these sectors or reality fields where the original 12 lineages unfolded their different types of cycles. The sun as a construct is connected to the galactic core, and other suns in not some, okay, I have to do this right. The original constructs of the holographic energetic reality fields, which is not just our planet, but our planet has been modified to third density in its original fourth density as part of the Pillar Project before the colonization, where it turned into this closed loop system where we are stuck in repetitive patterns. But before that, it was part of the Pillar Project. And the Pillar Project is part of what we call reality field that was re-engineered for that purpose, which in the beginning was part of the original lineages of the less progressive universal structure, which you know from the Souls of Humanity, is a new construction that was built upon the construct of the ancient ones that built the foundational holographic interactive simulation programs to unfold different forms of energetic configurations within complex systems, where the core node in that is the sun. That holds the core program for that reality field. That core program is connected to another network of solar core programs or solar nodes. They create a large network of solar nodes that evolves fourth dimensional civilizations. The fourth dimensional civilizations functions in reality fields where there is a sun. They can then work with the core information. That's kind of the main program of genetic modulation and genetic evolution in that reality field, where consciousness comes from some other cycles. That's the spillover of consciousness from the previous universal cycles, where the ancient ones were the first one that blasted through all of the universal structures. There are 12, and they create holographic simulation programs in all of them. Because holographic means that each energy unit holds the potential of the entire reality field it's part of. It's nothing to do with this two-dimensional laser beam, holographic mechanical interpretation. We're talking energy and consciousness here. So forget when you say hologram, you think about something that's projected. Where's it projected from? It's not projected. It's complex sciences within complex systems. So that means that we have a very complex holographic network that runs in different sectors we call domains, that unfolds different densities in the different domains. I explain that in my books, The Souls of Humanity. That's where I begin with, we have domain, the density 2, then dimension 1, density 2, dimension 3, dimension or whatever it's technically, density 1, dimension 1, and dimension 2, and dimension 3. So that's the DE1, D1, DE2, D2, and whatever. So that makes it very complex. So let me again slow down a little bit, because when I go up in energy, I just go blah, 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 because it's very clear to me when I'm looking at it, but I know people who are just listening might not find it so clear. In my books and the free courses, you will get this over and over again. So the outer domain is density 1. That's the vibrational state with a low level of radiation. So that means that the solar nodes that are there are technically non-existent in the original density 1. These are the outskirts of the overall construct of the LPU, where things get disposed of. So that means that's the end station. So they technically don't have viable suns. They have cold suns, non-functional suns, because the point is no longer to push for progression dynamics of consciousness units. Hence, there is no point in civilizations and life forms to exist there unless they vibrationally have pushed themselves into the semi-organic level, where they're doing the route out into nothingness, aka the void or the abyss. Density 2 is dimension 4, 5, and 6. That's why you have a sun. A sun comes in at the lowest point in density 2, dimension 4. That means that the suns that are there are the foundation for organic vessels as we kind of associate with them. However, the organic vessels are holographically engineered, so they themselves is a holographic program. a holographic construct that interacts with consciousness. So the only thing that's real in all universes within the 12 lineages is consciousness. And that's a feature we developed in the previous universal cycles, where we did a lot of very complex transformative processes through energy and interaction with different types of energies until we could call it a synergetic effect, some kind of emergent property of the complex dynamics of energy units merging, blending, evolving, created in the intelligent principle. And then that moved into further complex information. Some turned technological, and others began working with energy as a kind of, like we see it in many of the fallen groups, mind over matter, and all these kind of things, including what we often understand as a Kundalini activation. That's where you wrongfully push energies to function together to activate what we call the transmutation processes of the energy units in that attempt to try and create consciousness out of it. But it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work through a Kundalini activation. That is often, those who have it is often either artificially induced with that. And I know I'm probably saying, no, whatever. I would talk about a Kundalini activation on its own, because that's a whole other level of rabbit holes that are literally put out there when we talk about these things, because there's so many different interpretations in that one. But in my opinion, if people have a Kundalini activation, it's not always just a consciousness that descends. It can be 1,000 other things. So we have to investigate, what is it actually? What happened? Was it just a molecular activation of the biofield that then began to push for the clean out of the emotional and the mental field, because the grid that we belong to, due to our original holographic holographic energetic architecture. I call it that holographic energetic architecture, the template, because the grid that then got an infusion due to the new grand cycle and activation of our planet, so it can reset to its original construction, would it then push us as a last call out to, you now need to begin to remember who you are. That's not a Kundalini activation. Kundalini activation goes with chakra systems, that goes with the Brahmian lineages. That's a very narrow Sirian A group, that of groups that came from the Sirius A system that lost their own sun, that turned into a brown dwarf and stopped working. And that's why they came here as part of some of the early pillar projects. And later, the Sirian A group were the ones that decided to collude with the D10 collective when they colonized our civilization. And they became the foundation of the insectoid and the avian and the raptoid and some of the distorted mammal groups under their oversight, alongside with the Sirian beast that comes from the 5th dimensional level of the density 2. So Sirian A is a density 2 dimension 4 civilization. Sirius B is a density 2 dimension 5 civilization. But the Sirian A's were not hit to the same degree with the timeline event, but their genetics began to regress because the sun was dying. They had outplayed their transformative transition processes, and the system itself, the node, the sun, had then exhausted the possibilities it could with consciousness and energy, and then the sun begins to die. The Sirian bees were part of the density 2 dimension 5. Their sun is already a cold sun, because in dimension 5, you are then working with what we call more the radiation energies, but in a different way. Density 2 dimension 4 works with vibrational energies as part of the heart field, as part of learning to work as teams, as part of learning to work together under the principles, the rules of engagement, and the laws of the reality field. The rules and the principles and the laws are built in by the ancient ones into the holographic interactive reality programs, the constructs of the 12 reality fields, following the 12 lineages that came and began and laid the foundation of the 12 universes that we are now living in as part of the 12 cycles. In that holographic interactive simulation program, the HISP construct of the ancient ones, in these 12 universal structures, so they are all holographic and works with radiation and vibration principles. Vibration goes with the heart field, radiation goes with the brain field, where we develop the heart field, vibrate, resonates, build team, join, do the horizontal merging as I talk about, where we learn to understand who a next of kin is. Exactly, we are vibrating, we're not communicating, we're sharing information, and we're doing that for the highest good of the many. Radiation means that we are able to join our mental fields or our mind fields within technology and advanced types of technology that begins to work with the reality field itself. Density 2, dimension 4 works with the individual level of our elevation process and our progression journey under the rules and the laws and the principles. Dimension 5 in a density 2 system works with technology and science within the radiation principle, where you learn to work with the reality grid, the technology, the ancient ones, the technology of the ancient ones, how these different constructs are made, how everything works, how things are put together on a reality level. Okay, so density 2, dimension 4, self and other relational dynamics. Density 2, dimension 5, science and reality dynamics. Density 2, dimension 6, that's where you begin to work with the core technology and the understanding of moving into the galactic level, which is density 3. And here you will say, well, you just said, Randy, density 3 is kind of the Earth scheme, and that's right. And this is where it gets complicated. I'm sorry, this is very complicated, because the Earth scheme, yes, I keep saying it's a density 3, which is technically correct within a density 1 or domain 1. So this is again where it gets confusing. I'm so sorry about that. That's me trying to create a language where dimension 1, 2, and 3, because that doesn't fit. Because then dimension 1 would be the quantum field, dimension 2 would be molecular level, dimension 3 would then be the physical realm that we are existing in. And I could say that as well. So yes, so let me correct myself here now, that where I then have got the whole layout and I'll not get into this all confusion, because the human brain can only cope with so much. We are in a density 1 system, not a density 3, sorry, density 1 system. Let me correct myself, density 1 system. But it consists of 3 dimensions. Okay, so sorry about that, but good. We all make mistakes, and I do too, because I'm in this functioning through a gooey brain that can only hold so much. So when we go to the true density 3, that's actually galactic level. So good, we got that sorted. Density 3, galactic level. And in that, we have dimension 7, dimension 8, and dimension 9. And I'll talk about that in the activation of the 2-8 pillar, which has begun this year. And that means we will have a new wave of activation from the grid itself that will activate those who are connected to the 2-8 pillar and the original projects they participated in. So those who got activated back in 2016, they were part of the 3-9 pillar and the projects they came and were part of here. Those who got activated back in 2007, they were part of the 4-10 pillar. Those who got activated back in 1999, they were part of the 5-11 pillar. And there were very few that got activated into the 6-12 pillar, because that's the core domain. But that's technically the Jupiterian lineages, the Jupiter lineages. So we could also, when we talk astrology, we could look at the planets and say they're associated with different pillars and different soul groups that are here and have different projects. And by that, they have different features that has very little to do with what astrology tells us. So we can, again, and that's a book that I have read, but it's just, the editing of that one will be so complex to really begin to investigate, okay, what does that actually mean for astrology if we are to work with our birth chart, which I call the enslavement chart? How are we actually to work that if we are to understand how the planets are put there? Is it kind of on a collective level that we are understanding the dynamics of Jupiter, or is it on an individual level as part of the 6-12 pillar? So there's a lot of questions that arises in that I haven't figured out yet, but it will come at some point. So going back to suns are a 4th dimensional feature. they will go more and more faint. If the civilization works correctly, it will transform into what we could call a fifth dimensional sun. It's still there, but it runs more on what we call a type of radiation energy. And that's not a dwarf, it's a different type of expansion of the sun that fits with the civilizational evolution. If the civilization drops out of the fourth dimension in the density 2 vibrational state and their heart fields grow cold and close, the sun will become more hot and begin to self-destruct. And it will begin to shed off the different fields and the different shields that it has. It has vibrational fields and it has radiation shields. It will begin to shed this off because it detects as a construct, as technology, that the civilizations in that reality field no longer has evolutionary progressive potentials. And it begins to shut down and deconstruct. And with that, the core program of the holographic interactive simulation program of that reality field shuts down. That's what a sun is there for. It oversights, it runs naturally as part of the ancient ones and their constructs, the 12 universal cycles, the 12 lineages, the 12 universal groups, and the 12 universal matrices or holographic interactive simulation programs, however you want to put it, is a very complex nested system that interacts with each other. And as more and more of the density 2 dimension 4 system loses their ability to organic civilizations, which can happen in two ways, either because the civilizations themselves progress into a fifth dimension, or they lose the ability for progression and begin to regress and go into density 1. Then the sun in that system adapts to its civilizational viability rate. The viability rate is what's being infused from the sun into the grid of that reality field, which then fuels the holographic energetic template that is behind the organic vessels, which then assist in creating an environment in the holographic energetic template in the surroundings of that consciousness structure, so that consciousness can evolve through the local holographic energetic architecture where we have our own local fields that are tied to our consciousness possibilities within a larger system that is connected to the sun, which is a mirroring effect of the core dynamics of the original holographic and interactive simulation programs. I call them the Condor rays in the old material, of the core domain of the LPU that was set by a joint decision of the original holographic progressive civilizations of the true universal structures and the true universal cycles when they created the LPU to create this playground for those who were not up to snuff when the original worlds began their elevation process some 10,000 cycles ago, whatever that means. Anyways, that's just, there's no time period on that. So these are the steps that we need to understand how things have been downstepped. And the LPU in itself it ends with the density 3. Whatever we have in density 4, which is the core domain, is where we have the overall programs that were administered and changed by those of us who came from the original worlds to participate in the LPU. We reconstructed in the 9th dimension the worlds below to become the LPU. The 10, 11, and 12, if we're saying well, there are D10 and D11 and D12, they became the oversight groups of the LPU. And that's why the D10 collective, when they deflected and decided to do their own programs because they were regressing, and their their D2 dimension 4 suns were dying out, they decided to colonize our hub because we were succeeding and we were getting ready to leave. So we had already gone through a lot of the processes and the programs had been run multiple times. Our genetics, as I call our consciousness units, when they merge with energy and become this complex life form unit, had already succeeded through most of the pillars in the Pillar Project, despite the timeline event. And you have to understand the timeline event set all of the civilizations back in our quadrant. So instead of being a joint team for the highest good of the many, what the infection does from the timeline event is it changes the radiation units. Hence, the Syrian bees turned suddenly on a fifth dimensional level, began to revert and turn more mechanical. The density 2, dimension 4 civilizations, their heart fields began to get what is the infection? They began to vibrate reversely. They inverted. Instead of for the highest good of many, it became service to self. All the things were flipped upside down. And that's a whole other story, of which I'm not so interested in talking about the side effects of all these things that happen. I've gone through, I know what happened and I know what it is, but I don't want to give it energy. I don't want to link to it. I don't want to, due to the principle 3, the low participation, I don't want to talk about it because I don't want to link up to it. So I'm just mentioning it here. And if it's part of your journey, you will figure that one out yourself when you activate these levels, because it's being activated in your holographic energetic architecture, because due to the new grand cycle, that's where this entire experiment of the LPU comes to an end, because there is no longer genetic material that goes with the original holographic interactive simulation program. There is no longer people on this planet and in our solar system that are working with the core principles of the original Pillar Project. Hence, things are shutting down mechanically, automatically, as I explain in my book, The Halls of Philosophy. So I hope this is giving a little bit of an overview. And why is it important for me to take away the fact that the sun is not conscious? Because the moment we begin to see things as living entities, it does something to our heart field, which at some point can be a good thing. But it also vibrationally blocks us from actually participating and seeing what is really going on with our sun. And for me, there are days where when I go outside, the sun takes my energy, because it's diffusing, it's deconstructing. It is a dying sun now. It's been that for a long time, but it really kicked in 2015, and we got connected to the Dark Galactic Core in 2017. We had the event program overlay that took away a lot of the momentum of the sun and depleted our grids. We have had a lot of looping from the lunars. We have had a lot of looping from the other groups that were trying to get what they could out of the grids before they no longer could be here, and were pushed due to the laws of energetic and vibrational and energetic energetic genetic affinity. That's what I call it. When the radiation and vibrational fields are radiating, vibrating in a specific way, you are drawn to a different universe. The one that you used to be part of, it's no longer visible for you, because you're no longer resonating with it. You're no longer radiating with the information system. There is no longer any progression possibility for you in that system. And if that system changes so foundationally, then you will disconnect from it naturally. And we've seen these dynamics run in our own little local fields as we learn to operate in our own higher dimensional structure. We begin to understand these dynamics. All right. And the reason why I got confused with the density 3, I know where that comes from, because in the early days I listened to Alex Collier, and he always called it a density 3 system, because that's what the bluish Andromedans told him. And that confused me. That kind of made me doubt myself. That's kind of a little virus that came into my original construct and the understanding of how I see things. And that's okay. That's fine. We all make mistakes. Nobody is flawless, as we say, because we are working through this gooey brain. For me, what's important when I work with the sun as a construct, first and foremost, when I work through the heart field that has a natural tendency to do horizontal merging. If I go into the density 2 dimension 4 vibrational horizontal merging feature, and I look at the sun as part of what it used to be, then of course it vibrates to my heart field, and that level of the sun then gives me infusions. If I go to density 2 dimension 5, then I can see the core of the where we're supposed to transform into a fifth dimensional sun. began, and that's the level that were adapted and transformed by the Syrian bees when they were here and doing their crystalline projects, and they're using that part of it to create their new earth. When I go to the dimension 6 of the sun, because it is part of this progressive transformative levels of the sun as the civilizations in the density 2 changes, then in the dimension 6, that is where the Andromedan technology has connected to dimension 6 in the sun, that layer, that structure, as well as the dimension 6 as part of inner earth technology. That creates the Trinity structure that is being fused and fueled by the Andromedan technology on the subsidiary timeline. If I go into the 7th dimension of the sun, I get into complete non-organic Arcturian technology. And then in dimension 8 of the sun, we have the dark Orion grids that are fueling the dark level of the sun and turning the rest of the sun, of whatever the construct had, into a dark sun, the black sun. So that's why the sun is not just a good thing. Depends on what level are you vibrating on, what level are you viewing the sun from. Okay, so that's important when we talk the consciousness expansion journey. All right, so that's why it's important for me to not see it as consciousness, but see it as a construct, because then I can work with it scientifically. If I see it as a consciousness being, then my heart goes into, because I can feel it's dying, then my heart goes into all sorts of hoops and loops and all sorts of things. And if it were a consciousness being, and if I were saying, I will sit here, sun gaze every day and absorb the energy of that consciousness being, then I would technically violate the 12 rules of conscious evolution. I would then use another living entity to fuel my own energy system. And I can't do that. That's against the laws. That creates distortion. You cannot exploit other life forms to keep your own energy system functional. You can't do that. So the only thing I can do, of course, we can self-justify and say, well, the sun said it wanted to give me that energy. No living consciousness being gives energy so another consciousness being can thrive. That's why it's a construct. It emits information potentials and different types of complex structures that assist us in activating our holographic energetic architecture as part of a holographic principle of where the sun keeps the code, the main program running for us, so we're reminded of how we are supposed to do this consciousness journey. That's what the sun is doing for us. And it's a construct. It's vibrating that as a very advanced type of modulation technology, let's put it that way, that interacts with our holographic energetic architecture. And our consciousness units are then processing this triangulation into adaptive, transformative processes that assist us in undoing the effects of the timeline event. That's why it's important for me to have that distinction. And for some of you, it might not make a great difference, but it does for me. And that's why I see it that way. That's what makes most sense to me. That's where I can be the most responsible person, where I can be most clear in how I work with the reality configuration. But of course, I could contemplate on sitting with, which I did in the early days, with the different artificial inserted astral formations of Earth as Gaia and as a great woman that is in her convulsion and she's having birth pains and all sorts of things. And I cried my eyes out. And I felt this huge compassion with our planet. And I was drawn into all of this, which I now know is driven by the insectoid great beings of the Orion system, because they came to this planet. They're kind of, hey, you're ruining this place. We're supposed to be here. We're supposed to thrive here. And you're ruining it for us. Anyway, so that's part of the interfactional disputes that are going on as well. But they are trying to teach humans to take care of the planet, because they were working with this, hey, we just got here. It's all falling apart, because humans are now on the trajectory of potentially learning to work with technology, but repeating the mistakes of Atlantis. And in that way, they are not doing what they're supposed to do. And we just got here and we want to preserve this. Okay, so that's my interpretation of that. So if I do that with the sun, of course, it affects my heart field, and I will investigate that too, because that's an interesting exploration journey. It tells me now I've done the logical, rational, scientific approach, then I need to work with what's the effect that has on my heart field. What does that do to me? And the sadness I feel, what's that sadness about? And the sadness that always comes when I go into these levels is a personal one that goes with, this was such a good project. And it was just so messed up. And then, of course, my human level wants to go into, oh, it was because of them and them and them. And then I do segregation dynamics, which technically collapse my heart field. So I don't go into, oh, it's also because of the Cyrenae and because of the Dracos and because of this and that. I've gone through that. I went through that in the artificial fourth. That's part of the journey. At this point, because I've gone through that already, and I've been dealing with insectoids, I've been dealing with avians, I've been dealing with reptoids, I've been dealing with slugs and squids and technology and greys and mantids and military projects. And at this point, I'll just go in and heal that wound and just disconnect from that level and realize where we are, see things as they truly are, and work with this as it is now. Not what it was, not what I wanted to be, and not what I hope for it could be. And just get into that understanding of this is actually what it is, and being in alignment with that. And then allow my holographic energetic architecture to wake up on that level and say, this system is now beginning to fully reset. That means that there are different features of my holographic energetic architecture that potentially should, if they work correctly, kick in. So that's the vibration I'm now sending out to my system. The sun is in its shutdown process. We are under the new grand cycle. This system is resetting. This project is over. What's the next step that I need to do in this activation and awakening process? Because that is what it is for me. It's not because our system is elevating, it's because it's shutting down, and we get the final chance to walk out of here following the dynamics of the subsidiary timeline. That's what we could call the evacuation path. But it works from the sixth dimension, so that means we have to clear the regressive dynamics of the fourth dimension and the non-organic and semi-organic and wrongful use of technology as part of the fifth dimension. And that's part of our journey to figure out what that means for each and one of us. Point being, when we are working with our constructs of reality, and that means our own personal ones, and the ideas we have and the sciences we come across and the way we put these together, remember all of them are temporarily there to investigate and unfold different levels of our own holographic energetic architecture, to activate our consciousness potentials so that we can create that orb that allows us to go on the subsidiary timeline and follow the passage out that follows the laws of energetic and genetic vibration and follow the laws of correct radiation, also called energetic genetic affiliation. It's a kind of a portal. You can only get out through it if you vibrate and radiate in alignment with it. Until next time, take care.